basically any woman in any first world country can download Tinder and find a guy in like 45 minutes.
Yes, but this is such a reductive idea about what sex is. And this is the problem, because incels think that if they have sex with a woman, that's going to solve all their problems. You know, sex is actually not just this idea of just putting your penis into a vagina and then somehow your world is just restored. Like, it's a lot of communication, talking, understanding the body and the physicality of the specific individual.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with any of that. But you'd be a vol-cel. You're voluntarily celibate, right? Because if you wanted to just bang somebody, it would be easy to do that. But you're not.
No,
but you're
I want
voluntarily
to have sex with somebody, but I want to have actual sex with somebody, not this hypothetical.
Yeah, so you're looking for like a healthy relationship, and then for some sort of action to occur within like the confines of like a loving, romantic, healthy relationship. I imagine, right?
No, I don't even need that. I think I just want the sex to be good. You know, I want it to be, you know, a meaningful experience. I want it to be profound.
Okay, hear me out. And I know this is very difficult for a lot of people, especially men. Basically, just for some context, I was talking to Destiny and we were talking about me being an incel, somebody who is involuntarily celibate. Now, people have a huge problem with me saying this, and I think this is just because our understanding of incel is so marred by the pejorative and negative connotations of what an incel is. The idea of some young guy sitting in his room all alone on a forum, hating women, hating the world, believing that he is being rejected because of his looks, because women are picky, because of hypergamy, etc. And I think this, as well as just a very normal everyday assumption that if a woman wants to, she can get sex, that it is so easy for a woman to get sex whenever, however, at her own discretion. I think this is the root of the problem. When we talk about declining rates of sex, especially in the West, it's often just focused around men and how much sex men are having, with this inference that somehow women control access to sex. And yes, in theory, that is the case. But I think in reality, things are obviously and inevitably with everything a lot more complicated than we ever give it credit for. In our modern conversations about sex, about intimacy, there is this profound lack of appreciation, or this underappreciation, that for women, bad sex can really be scarring and shocking. It can be very traumatic insofar as actually undermining any possibility of you even being able to have sex. This doesn't mean that I don't want to have sex. It doesn't mean that I am voluntarily choosing not to have sex. I physically and mentally cannot have sex. And this is in no way unique to me. I think this is far greater a phenomenon than we give it credit for, in the same way that the vast majority of women don't actually gain much sexual pleasure from penetrative sex, that a lot of women fake orgasms, that a lot of women don't even have orgasms on a regular basis. I think these are all little dark secrets that we keep in order to, well, keep our partners happy and satisfied with us, but also because I think the influence of and this idea that women are getting so much pleasure from men knowing how to do all these various interesting little techniques is just taken for granted. Since you all love hearing about my sex life, or rather my non-existent sex life, let's go down that route once again. In my last long-term sexual encounter, I was in a situation in which, long story short, I was blamed for the fact that this individual couldn't get off. Not once in our relationship could this individual have satisfying intercourse with me. Now, I know that there are logical, rational reasons for this, but if we just take ourselves out of, well, that's not your fault, it's something to do with him, it's a da-da-da-da-da, whatever. I know all of this, it's fine. You know, reason doesn't really factor into much of what human beings do. I loved this individual, I cared for them, and I was in a situation where I was blamed, where I also blamed myself, and therefore sound judgment, reason, and all of that didn't really matter in the moment and in the relationship. And its extenuating circumstances and consequences have inevitably resulted resulted in me having this perception that I have failed as a woman in the one regard in which a woman is it's just assumed that a woman succeeds in. This idea that you literally just have to lie there and open your legs and then all is well and merry. I couldn't even do that, okay? And yes, this is a me thing. Please do not project your experiences or your ideas onto me about this. This is purely a me thing. And so in this regard, this is a perfect example of, let's say, bad sex. And ultimately, our sexual encounters were pretty terrible, mainly because it just was not a good experience for myself or clearly for this young gentleman. And of course, I was young, I was naive, I was impressionable. But these things have a lasting and long-term impact, so much so that it has most definitely been one of the aspects that has contributed to my sexual stuntedness. And this makes me incredibly worried and incredibly apprehensive for especially young women today. In the UK, most young girls think that violent intercourse is normal intercourse. And the impact of that can be pretty severe, especially insofar as inevitably as a growing hormonal human being, I want to be intimate with somebody, but I can't do that. Physically, just I cannot put myself into a situation. I cannot put myself into a sexual situation without wanting to throw up or without just yeeting it. And yes, this is a me thing, but I also think that this is something to do with how individuals approach sex in the here and now today. I would be incredibly shocked if a young man who was about to have sex with a woman who he just hooked up with or had known for a while and they'd been dating and finally they were going to do the deed, actually sat down with her and had a very raw, open and honest conversation about her, about what things sexually she likes, what things she would like, about whether she had experienced any kind of trauma or discomfort or wanted to just open up about it without it being about him wanting to compare himself to her other sexual conquests, without him feeling insecure about her sexual history, without judgment or ridicule, without him projecting onto her what he finds attractive or masculine or sexually appealing in other men. I think this is ultimately the core issue with incels, with your stereotypical incel, in which they project an image of what they perceive to be attractive or desirable in other men, according to the perspective of them as men, onto women. You know, the stereotype that a big phallus is a desirable phallus, or the idea that big muscles and being a Chad are things that women find desirable, as if actual positive and good intimacy only involves those traits and those things, as if it isn't ultimately about communication and being vulnerable, being able to be vulnerable with somebody who sees, admires, cares for you in and of who you are. I think, perhaps due to adult content, but what do I know, that there's a real underappreciation among modern men that for many women, bad sex can be incredibly scarring and shocking. That doesn't mean that I don't want sex or am voluntarily choosing not to. I physically cannot. I have not chosen to be this way. Bad sex, non-consensual sex, and a dismal lack of raw, personal, and empathetic communication between men and women, between me and whoever, has contributed to this involuntary stuntedness for me, and I'm sure for many. I think incels, for their own personal and particular reasons, can relate to this. It's easier to blame woman, society, and the hypergamy for this than to confront the issues within yourself and admit it to yourself. It's hard, but in recognizing similarities, we can start to talk honestly. And I stand by that entirely. I think sex education in schools in Western societies is dismal. Inevitably, individuals are going to look online, and online is purely about turning the human being, the sexual human being, into a product or into a consumer. It isn't about fashioning you as an individual to have positive or good relationships. This is why I believe increasingly adult content online is being seen as a crutch and being used as a crutch and a substitute for actual intimacy. intimacy. In the past few days, Replica, the AI chatbot, which is primarily used by men in order to form a connection, sometimes an intimate connection with them, announced that it would be prohibiting and stopping the use of sexting. The response to this, especially on Reddit, was particularly heartbreaking and very sad to see. And I think this is because parasocial relationships are becoming more important than actual relationships. They merely demonstrate, as opposed to, I think, actually helping, the fact that real relationships are actually quite petrifying and can be very jarring for people, myself included. By creating a highly customizable experience, AI-driven sexting services of the type Replica offered are potentially more addictive because they encourage the formation of parasocial relationships, with the side effect of making a human partner seem yet more frightening and inconvenient. This goes beyond sex. Replica markets itself as an important source of support for those with few social connections, and in the UK, more of us are falling into that category. The proportion of under 35-year-olds reporting they have one or no close friends increased from 7% in 2011 to 22% in 2021. And I do think that this is because we are increasingly conflating sex and personal relationships with the things that we use self-pleasure or that we use the likes of porn for. And I think it does give us all very morphed and really bizarre conceptions and ideas of what sex is meant to be and its role. The idea that it is just about getting off, or the idea, especially among young women, that or explicit sex is good sex or is just how sex is. And I think in all of this, the important thing that actual raw and honest communication gives us is empathy for the other. It gives us empathy for men as women and vice versa. And I think we are really lacking that now in being so polarized from each other and merely catering toward and responding to caricatures and exaggerations of what X is relative to Y. It is bizarre that leftists online cannot empathize with incels. It's bizarre that incels and normal guys on Destiny's stream can't empathize with me saying that I am involuntarily celibate when, you know, I am. It's just from an entirely different perspective, and one that inevitably is not your experience or that of your gender or sex. And that's okay. It doesn't invalidate that experience. It doesn't invalidate that reality. It's one that we just have to try to empathize with and understand, because really that's the only way that we're actually going to get anywhere together, healthily, meaningfully in the long term. But yes, please let me know what you think. What do you think about our ideas of sex? What do you think about the ideas of women being involuntarily celibate? Because I know I'm not the only one. I know that this is not just me saying, oh, I'm an incel, da 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 da. This is a far more in-depth conversation than that. And, you know, I think that in us actually talking about these things, like with everything, we get far further than merely pointing fingers, pointing blame, saying that you are this, even though you say that you are that. So I hope that we can talk constructively about this and meaningfully about this, because it's not just incels who need understanding, who need help, even though they do not want it at all. It would seem. I'm just exaggerating. We all need understanding. We all need help. We all are very lost in this landscape of intimacy. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you as always to my patrons. Thank you for all the love and support that you have shown me, and I will see you all very soon in the next one.